Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 48 of the Law Ninja Choke MMA Picks podcast. As always, I'm joined by Will in the UK and Josh in Australia, and today we are going to be breaking down Strickland versus Hernandez, going through some of the fights in more detail and giving you our bets for the card. So without any further ado, let's get into it. This is the card for UFC Houston at the weekend, headlined by Strickland and Hernandez in the middleweight matchup. And then you can see, some interesting fights below that. I think given the quality of cards upcoming, this is actually probably the highest we're going to get for a while, wouldn't you say, chaps?
Yeah, I mean, I can agree with that. Like, for the whole week, typically during the week, we kind of like discuss, out of recording what fights we want to cover. I feel like this week particularly has been hard for us because we were like, oh, I don't know who to take. I don't know who to cover. So this entire card's a bit of a mess. Although compared to next week's card, it looks great. So there's that.
Yeah, I agree. It's one of those ones where like nothing really jumps out at me, but the more I did research on it, the more I actually am excited for almost every single fight. Like there's a lot of stylistic narratives that make this one interesting, but I feel like if you're coming at it completely fresh, having not really done any research, it's just not, there's no name value. It's not that exciting. I mean, obviously you've got Sean Strickland, but the difference between Sean Strickland, the personality, and Sean Strickland, the fighter, are very different things, aren't they? So I guess from a pure MMA perspective, Sean Strickland's not the name that he would be if this was a press conference.
Yeah, so we picked these three fights to have a look at today. We're going to break down the main event. We're going to skip Neil Medic, probably be pure chaos. We've got Ige Costa, and then we'll skip the heavyweights and round out with Jacobe Smith against Josiah Harrell. So let's get into the main event.
All right. So Sean Strickland is currently doing his press conferences. He's making sure that he's selling this fight by giving you a controversial take on absolutely every single element of social commentary at the moment. But on Saturday night, the two of them are going to show down and they're going to fight. And this is an interesting fight. It's been a very polarizing one in terms of commentary that you're seeing online. A lot of people are very intrigued by the underdog in Sean Strickland here. And I can kind of see why. I think that when you think about the skills that Anthony Fluffy Hernandez brings to the table, and you think about how Sean Strickland deals with being faced with those, he matches up quite well with it to a certain extent. Firstly, obviously the wrestling. We know that Anthony Hernandez is a pressure wrestler. He likes to get in his opponent's face. He likes to sort of stick to them like glue and put a high pressure out there. Lots of mat returns, lots of takedowns, and basically just drain the cardio and completely sap them of all energy. Make them quit essentially, and then finish them in the later rounds. That's what he's done to a lot of his UFC opponents in his current streak, and he looks very good doing it. I've made a lot of comparisons to Merab Dvalishvili in his style. He's basically the middleweight Merab because honestly, I think that skill for skill, he's not elite at any one particular avenue of mixed martial arts. I think he's a pretty good grappler on the mat. His Brazilian jiu-jitsu looks very decent, which I think is really good because it arms him with a great skill set when he does have a tired opponent and he does manage to get into the mat. But aside from that, I don't really sort of find myself being wowed by anything that Hernandez does, like within a designated 30 seconds, if that makes sense. Whereas Sean Strickland, purely a striker, purely a distance striker, a jabber, and a cross and a straight is basically most of what he does, along with teep kicks. He doesn't wrestle offensively himself, but he has very good defensive tools pretty much everywhere. He's hard to land big strikes on, and he is hard to take down, and he's very hard to keep down, as we've seen in his fights against Dricus du Plessis more recently. I mean, du Plessis did take him down, I think, 7 times in the total of the fights that they, the total 2 fights that they had against each other. But if memory serves, I think he managed like 25 seconds of control time across all 7 takedowns. A very hard man to keep down. So I can see why people immediately think Sean Strickland has the tools to win this one. But I think that people are making a bit of a mistake in the analysis of pretty much everything I've just laid out on the table there. I think that really what people mean is that Sean Strickland is going to be hard to look good against. And I think there is a nuanced difference there, because just because you're not losing a fight doesn't mean you're winning it. And I think that against somebody like Fluffy Hernandez, or again like a Merab type fighter, that's a very key aspect to the fight. That's a big conversation point at the moment, that, you know, damage is the most important metric and positional control doesn't win you fights. But the way that guys like Fluffy Hernandez and Merab control fights means that it's very hard or impossible for you to do damage in return, if that makes sense. So if you can picture, you know, Fluffy Hernandez diving in for a single leg or a double leg, he's got Strickland against the fence, and it's his 19th takedown attempt. And we're in round 3. What has Sean Strickland done to demonstrate himself as the damage dealing round winner when Hernandez has been attached to his hips like glue for that long, if that makes sense? And I think that one of the key things that immediately jumped out to me when looking at this fight is that to beat a guy like Fluffy Hernandez or a Merab, to say it for the 100th time, you need to be dangerous, because you need to have that one punch KO power that can stop Fluffy dead in his tracks and make him hesitant and make him feel like he can't be a magnet and stick to you like glue. He has to really time his entries. He has to be patient, etc., etc. That is how a lot of strikers beat a lot of grapplers. They make them respect the entry, whereas this is Sean Strickland, you know. I've joked about it earlier on that he as a fighter is very different from him as a personality. He's very pillow-fisted. He hasn't KO'd or knocked down many fighters in the UFC, and it's plausible. It's always possible, you know. This is a cage fight at the end of the day. But I just think that Sean Strickland is lacking the one thing that you really need against Fluffy Hernandez. And it's really interesting. I said this before we started recording, but when Hernandez was fighting Roman Dolidze in his last fight, everyone was intrigued to see how he was going to handle a very dangerous man, because Dolidze has grappling background, also hits very hard, big dude. You know, like I just said, Hernandez had to be a little bit respectful of what was coming his way when he was sort of crashing the pocket and cutting that distance. Whereas against Strickland, I think he's going to be fine to take a couple of punches to the face to set up his takedown if he needs to. So yeah, I think this is a tricky fight for Strickland, in that I can only see a few ways that he can win, and I don't believe them to be particularly high likelihood. I think that his teep kicks to the body is probably going to be his main weapon here. I mean, against a wrestler, that's also a dangerous thing, because you're going to be off balance and you're offering your foot to them. So I think that's, you know, there's an opportunity for your leg to get swept there. But Hernandez has shown a bit of a weakness to the body. I think every time he's been hurt, and some of the times he's been finished in his career, it's been because he's been attacked to the body. So Strickland probably should utilize that if he's done the due diligence. And then also, you know, there's a possibility that Fluffy gets hurt by something, like in terms of punches to the head. I don't have any conviction in saying that at all. But yeah, I struggle to see a way that Sean Strickland can have like a replicatable path to victory here. So in terms of a bet, and in terms of who I think the value sides with, I think it's got to be Fluffy Hernandez. I think he's decent value at around -250, which I think is where the line currently sits. So yeah, he's the side for me. I think that he's just going to have too much for Strickland. Does anybody disagree? Anybody want to back Sean Strickland, or do you guys agree with me that Hernandez is going to be too much for him?
I do have a few things to kind of say. I mean, unless Dom, you want to go first, or
no, go ahead.
All right. This is kind of in like a dot point format, because I am a very basic bitch. But so bear with me. Visuals are going to matter here. I expect that Strickland and his somewhat placated pace is going to work against him here, unless he can visibly damage and cut open Hernandez. Because I mean, the judges don't see every strike. They often have bad angles. They often have bad, you know, visuals, or you know, a bad sight or whatever. And so any cuts or any markings post round, so after each round, is going to be part of the scoring criteria. And that's going to likely help out Strickland if he can get that striking thing going right. If he can damage Hernandez enough to cut him open early on, that's going to just add to his scoring factor even more. With that said, though, Hernandez and his relatively aggressive pace is going to create visuals himself, which tells the judges that he's trying things. He is going to be more aggressive. He's going to be the one pushing forward, and that perhaps gives the judges like an incentive to score the rounds to him, because it looks like he's busier, he's being more controlling in the matter, and it all ultimately comes down to whether or not the judges score the superficial damage of the cuts and bruises of Hernandez compared to Hernandez's control time or takedown attempts on whatever. So I don't really have a very strong lean here. I feel like if Strickland was to win, it'll be through the visuals alone. Like it's always going to be about the whole visual aspect of this fight, and I reckon he can maybe pull it off if he can cut open Hernandez and make him look like he's been through a war. Otherwise, it's likely going to be a Hernandez victory in which he just lays in praise or just holds him somewhere, for 25 minutes. Yeah, I'm not looking forward to this fight too much. I feel like it's going to be a bit of a slug, but it's an important fight because middleweight is a bit of a mess right now. I mean, I miss the days when Adesanya was like a champ and it ran properly, right? Like the contenders were known, but nowadays it's a bit murky, right? Like who's going to fight Chimaev? Is it going to be Strickland, Hernandez, RDR, whatever? Like I don't know. I went like off a tangent there. I apologize, but yeah, this is a weird one to even think about, and that's my thoughts on the matter. What about you, Dom?
Yeah, I think you guys have summarized everything pretty nicely. I think that Fluffy's going to win this fight. I can understand, like Will said, people attracted to the odds on a former champion. I would probably just remind people that, I mean, Sean Strickland didn't expect to be champion. He flew to Australia last minute and got a great win over Adesanya. But I think, and he competed well with DDP. I think Fluffy Hernandez would beat DDP. Honestly, that's how highly I rate Hernandez, because as Will said, he is like Merab in terms of the gas tank. So, the only way to beat someone like Fluffy is to, like you say, damage them, or to really be proficient on the ground. Now, I think that's the big unknown for us that we're going to get the answer to. That's where the intrigue comes. It's like Strickland's obviously, he talks about his wrestling, he talks about his BJJ. We're going to see that in full display like we've never seen it before on Saturday, that's for sure. So yes, he may be a great wrestler. Yes, he may have great BJJ. We've never seen it in a fight. No one's put it on him consistently. I could say like Kamaru Usman did that back in the day, but in recent memory, all his fights have been striking, and he's been that sort of one-track pace with the jab cross, like you said. And I think for me, the reason that I would be hesitant about betting on Strickland is really just the psychological aspect. Like listening to him talk with some of his interviews, he seems to be trying to convince himself that he's really in this fight. And of course, he will be in the beginning. But I think that he's gonna find this fight like hell. Basically, no one likes fighting Anthony Fluffy Hernandez, because he's gonna stick to you like glue. He's gonna make you work. People have said, "Oh, well, he won't get the takedowns." He doesn't need the takedowns. He just needs to stay close, keep throwing, the rabbit punches, and keep shooting and making you work back to your feet. And he'll drain your gas tank, and he'll just keep coming at you, provided he's not injured. So if he's fully fit, he's going to just have the Merab game plan, basically, and wear you down over 5 rounds. And I think that Fluffy Hernandez is very live for a finish here. So, yeah, I think Strickland's best path to victory is a decision. But I think Hernandez has the finishing upside as well as the decision upside here. So that's my take on the fight. And, now we're moving into not the co-main, but the third fight on the card. Dan Ige, veteran of the UFC, against Melquizael Costa. Not really a prospect anymore, but a sort of surging contender, I'd say. I don't know if he's ranked, but if he wins this fight, he'll certainly be ranked after this fight. So we have essentially what is a striker versus striker matchup, although Costa has got wrestling in his back pocket and BJJ, as does Dan Ige, who's I think his purple belt in BJJ. Costa's been on a bit of a tear. He's on a 5-fight win streak, I believe, at the moment. His last fight was very memorable. He fought Morgan Charrier, knocked him out with a head kick. I'm just going to check how many fights Costa's won in a row. Yeah, he's won 5 fights in a row. He head kicked Morgan Charrier into the stratosphere. That was in December. He didn't take any damage, so quick turnaround works out well for him, because that was 1 minute into the first round. And then before that, he had a war against Julian Erosa. And I think people probably are looking at this fight and going, oh, he went to decision with Erosa, couldn't finish him. But he was really having his way with Erosa for the first 2 rounds. I rewatched that fight, and he was just piecing him up. The way that Costa fights, if you see here, there's no reach advantage. So Dan Ige, despite being shorter by 3 inches, they both have a 71-inch reach. I mean, Dan Ige fights more compact. So Costa's more light on his feet. He has the kind of bounce, sort of not completely sideways Wonder Boy bounce, but he's almost like that. He's like bouncing on his feet. He likes to stay at range, and he has just like amazing kicking game. So I think that's going to be the tail of the fight here. It will be Dan Ige will need to close the distance and to get into the pocket safely to land his punches and then retreat. And Costa will be probably circling on the outside, landing his kicks. And if Dan Ige does come into the pocket, he'll have to time his punches and maybe time a takedown. And the reason I say that is because, so we talked about Costa's last 2 fights. Dan Ige, his last fight was actually a while ago. It was in June 2025. He lost to Pitbull, a fight in which I bet Ige in, thinking that Pitbull might be a little bit washed. Certainly watching Pitbull fight Yair Rodriguez, it seemed that he just didn't have what it took. But I think that was more me underestimating Yair being at a very high level. And yeah, I mean, Pitbull fought very close with Dan Ige. I rewatched that fight. It certainly wasn't like a domination. It was a clear 29-28, a very intelligent fight from Pitbull. So I'm still not fully convinced that Pitbull isn't washed, but he just had a really intelligent game plan. And I think that has been the story of Ige's career. People who had a really good game plan against him, Lerone Murphy, Diogo Lopez, Bryce Mitchell beat Dan Ige. I don't think he had a great game plan, just took him down. They generally get the better of Ige. Ige is someone who takes some time to work into a fight. And then sometimes he never works into the fight. So that's the issue. Sometimes he spends so long trying to figure out his opponents that he never gets there. So for me, I think that it does seem that the Costa money line is expensive, and that might be priced in, the head kick knockout of Charrier, and that Ige is definitely a step up. But then there's just this fact that the Ige never seems to put his stamp on fights, and he loses to the people we expect him to lose to, and he beats the people we expect him to beat. So his last wins are Sean Woodson, who he's kind of a anomaly, I'd say, at featherweight, given his height and his reach. Then he had a win over Andre Philly, and before that, Nate Landwehr. But he's got more losses recently. He's got 7 losses in his last 10. 6 losses in the last 10. So I think it's for Ige, it's not a fight that he necessarily will get dominated in. But I think that Costa just has too much in his weaponry. He's got spinning attacks. He's got good hands, not as powerful as Ige. Ige has the power in the hands, but the power in the kicks obviously is Costa. I think Costa has the more aggressive BJJ and wrestling here as well. So I think he can win the fight wherever he wants. Now, famously, Ige has never been knocked out. Hawaiians don't get knocked out. He's never been knocked out, and he's never been submitted. But I think he's really fighting someone here who has all the tools to finally put that to bed. And I think Costa's actually live for a finish. So that's my kind of hot take. I think the decision is far more likely, and that's already priced in. The Costa decision is -150, so I won't be touching that. For me, I do see some value in the Costa money line, so I'm playing the Costa money line. And I think Costa inside the distance is live. And if you ask me how I think that's possible, I think it's mainly through accumulated damage. I think Costa peppering Ige with the jab, and especially with the kicks to his body, to his legs, to his head. If that happens for 3 rounds, I see the finish potentially coming late in the third round if Ige gets wobbled. And incidentally, you were saying, oh, well, will he get wobbled? Well, he was wobbled in his last fight, actually. So if you watch the Pitbull fight, very close first round. In the second round, Pitbull dropped Ige to a knee. So, you know, there are signs here that the Ige is starting to, you know, the iron chin is starting to go. I'm backing Costa here. I think maybe the money line is, you know, where it currently is, it's like -2 something. It doesn't really hold much value, but I got in there before it moved, so I'm happy with -180. And yeah, I'd love to hear what you guys think, because I know it's controversial because he's a popular fighter and he's had a very storied career.
Yeah, it's funny because I was on board with absolutely everything you were saying until you came to the conclusion of the bets, and that's where you lost me, which is really funny because it, you know, just demonstrates how you can see a fight the same way, but when you're given a plethora of options of how to bet, the strategy of sports betting and like how you dissect numbers is a completely different ball game. So we can have completely different conclusions. But in terms of like the actual breakdown of the fight, I agree wholeheartedly. I think this is a case of Costa demonstrating that he's ever so slightly better than Dan Ige. It shouldn't be a whitewash, but I think that the diversity of striking, the distance management, the kicking game specifically, probably is going to be a bit too much. An angle I think that I was expecting going into fight week, people to be talking about a lot here that no one seems to have done, is that Melquizael Costa also wrestles. You know, like he's attempted a takedown in every single UFC fight except the Charrier one recently, which lasted like 70-something seconds. But Dan Ige, I mean, I think there's a funny statistic going around that he's never won a fight where he's been taken down, I think, which is obviously, you know, not a serious statement, but it does definitely highlight the fact that he has a grappling deficiency. You mentioned Bryce Mitchell, who was obviously able to do that by a pure wrestling path. I think, if I remember correctly, Lerone Murphy also did similar. But basically, you know, I would say if you're game planning for this one and you are a mixed martial artist with a variety of like weapons, Melquizael Costa should be looking for some takedowns here and there. So given the fact that nobody's talking about it, I am intrigued to see where the stat props come out for this one, see how many takedowns the bookies imagine Melky could get, because you could end up with some value on those. But no, in terms of like my conclusions for this one, a betting line that really interested me was the finish only scorecards no action market. So I appreciate the, you know, looking at Costa inside the distance at +500 and seeing that Dan Ige got wobbled by Pitbull a couple of times. Like, it's hard to disagree with you on a +500 there. Like, I absolutely see that. But I think if you were to find out that this fight had a finish in it, I think it's fair to assume that Ige's more likely to be the one to finish it, in my personal opinion, just because he does hit incredibly hard. Melky has sometimes faded a little bit in round 3 as well, like in fights where he has to particularly hustle. So I think that, you know, Ige is also, in my opinion, pound for pound, one of the hardest hitters in MMA, in the UFC for sure. So I think he can't be counted out for what he may be able to do from a damage and fight ending perspective. But, you know, obviously that doesn't lean into him winning a decision so much. So I do expect Melky to be the favorite overall. I actually bet Melky like -188, I think. Weird UK numbers. Because I thought he was just the superior minute winner and that he would probably be okay to wrestle his way to a win if he needed to. But seeing the way that the finish only market was basically at a pick'em, I thought that was pretty interesting. So I cashed out and went back to the Dan Ige side, hoping that, you know, obviously if Ige doesn't finish, I'll get my money back. So I'm very much hoping that Melquizael Costa does not finish him. So that's because that's what my bet depends on, if it's going to lose. But yeah, I think it's an intriguing fight. Melky has gone from being somebody that's, you know, we weren't that impressed by, I don't think. I mean, his debut against Thiago Moises was, you know, a foregone conclusion by the looks of it, because Moises, when he grapples, is very good. And then he beat a few guys that weren't that impressive. Lost to Steve Garcia, which it's very weird when guys lose to Steve Garcia, because Garcia was another one that I don't think people thought he was any good until suddenly he was like top 15. So those wins have kind of aged really well. But yeah, I still wouldn't be surprised if Melquizael Costa isn't as good as we think he is in terms of his like overall career. but time will tell. I reckon that Dan Ige is one of those guys who, when he's an underdog, he is pretty good value because he'll definitely fight for your money. But when he's a favorite, he's flawed and not to be trusted, which I know we made the mistake of with Pitbull last time around. But I think that Dan Ige at plus money is the side I definitely gravitate towards now, thinking about it from a numbers perspective. But yeah, so that's my kind of like, not necessarily disagreeing with you at all, really, in terms of how you break down the fight. But I just think that the value conversation sits with Ige personally. Josh, how about you? How do you see this one going down?
I kind of want to focus a little bit on the wrestling side here, because I know that both fighters are decent strikers. Ige's got the boxing, Costa's got the everything else, right? But when it comes to the wrestling, I always look at Ige and I always look at his counter wrestling like I look at JDM's counter wrestling, right? Like whenever Pitbull took Ige down, for example, Ige had a great instinct of using the knee shield to create a barrier, make some space, and get a sweep. That's essentially what like JDM does whenever he gets taken down by someone who isn't Islam Makhachev, right? So I do think that Ige will find his way to defeat over and over again. In terms of like the stats, I think you guys mentioned like what the takedown stats might look like. I reckon. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Costa took Ige down more than 7 times. Like if the stats show 7 takedowns throughout those 3 rounds, I would be not at all shocked. But when it comes to the striking, I have a bit of a weird thing when it comes to the striking, because I have fallen in love with like Ige's boxing. He is hittable, but he's also one who has a very intelligent raised guard. He has a lot of like angles he tries to use when he strikes, and I just don't know if like Costa has that formulaic approach when it comes to like boxing. Like that boxing defense isn't there or isn't effective enough for Costa, to block Ige's shots. But yeah, you guys pretty much said it all, really. Like I had like a list of things to say, but I deleted those little points as you guys were talking. But yeah, I don't think I personally don't think there's going to be a finish here. I reckon it's going to be a grueling 3-round battle, and eventually someone's going to win, right? So my pick was Costa, but as you'll see in a couple of slides, I suppose, I do have a bet on Ige, so there's that. But yeah, that's my take.
Cool. Let's move on to the third fight we're going to focus on.
Yeah, Jacobe Smith, my guy. I don't know why I like him so much, because this morning, like a few hours before we were recording this, I was watching Smith fight Nico Price, and I'm like, yeah, sure, Smith is a good first round finisher, but afterwards he looks like a shit fucking fighter. He needs like that USADA approved puffer that Greg Hardy used back in the day. He needs that in between rounds, because he was gasping for air, and I know that that's probably a concerning thing to say, and because I picked Smith, it concerns me that I'm saying this, but I still think Smith is the lean here, and I'll tell you why. When it comes to Harrell's striking and Harrell's like wrestling, offense, and whatever, he's fine. He can throw heavy. He throws like a brick. He doesn't have much athleticism, but he does hit hard. He does explode into his opponents a lot, right? But Smith is a lot more of a surgeon when it comes to his striking. He can really penetrate the guard of his opponent. He can snipe his way into range. He can do all of these great things without using a lot of volume. And I think the mistake that he made when he fought Price was that he kind of chased the finish early. He wanted to get Price out of there because he is a first round finisher, but he didn't. So that kind of like blew the gasket and whatever. So I do think in this case we are going to see perhaps a more measured pace from Smith, because obviously when a fighter this young, this new, has those issues in the cage where he fatigues early and people criticize him for that, he is going to go back to the drawing board and be like, all right, I got to improve my cardio, I got to improve my pacing, all that stuff. And given that he has achieved so much good stuff in his career so far at a young age, and given that his whole team is at American Kickboxing Academy, aka, which is like Daniel Cormier's gym, Cain Velasquez's gym, all those decent big ass people, right? I mean, you would expect that Smith gets all the training he needs, and he does. I mean, when he fights, he does, and he does fight like a favorite, or like a favorite should. He does win, and yeah, I just can't pick against Smith in this particular fight, because as much as people have told me Harrell can be dangerous, I can't see it, because Harrell's last opponent on LFA was some guy with a name I can't remember or pronounce. But when I watched that fight, his opponent kind of just like gave up in the middle of the fight, and it looked really, really poor on Harrell not to finish him. And I just didn't really, I don't know. It just irks me, right? Like to look good against the fighter, but not really dominate in any sense. It's a red flag. But I don't know where to go from here. I guess I'll quickly go to the bets part. I suppose. I got Smith here for round 1 KO. I reckon that's a decent prop to make, or not make, but like to take, I guess. And if anything else, this fight should not go the distance. If it does, I would be shocked. I'd be bored as well, because maybe it'll be a slop fest, but I'd be shocked too. So that's my bet recommendations here. This is a fun fight. I am a huge Jacobe Smith fan, and yeah, I hope Harrell fights like a bum for the sake of my bets and my picks and whatever. So yeah.
Thanks, Josh. Will, have you got any thoughts to add?
In terms of the fight itself, no, because I haven't done any tape on his opponent. But I do think it's interesting from like a numbers perspective that the public seem to actually be giving a little bit of respect to Harrell. I'm not even sure how to pronounce his name, because like, if we're being honest, like Jacobe Smith is a big prospect. It's a name that when you're talking about up and coming guys who most people don't know about but should have on their radar, I think he's probably up there. I mean, obviously people, whenever he's mentioned, people always mention the AKA link, Daniel Cormier's prodigy kid, which is kind of the angle that I think Smith's been sort of touted towards. He's also obviously having a lot of round 1 finishes, which is always good for your hype. So when you're getting a short notice guy coming in from the regional scene who has absolutely no UFC background, you would expect them to be kind of in like the minus 400, 500, 600 range. But currently, Smith is like minus 300, which is interesting, because it just, to me, it just kind of looks like there's a little bit of value on the, well, not value, but there's a little bit of like intrigue on the Harrell side, and that maybe he actually is like competitive and maybe worthy of being in the UFC in his own right. So that's interesting, at least. But I can't really speak on it anymore because I've not taped it. I do really like the angle that you looked at in terms of Smith coming back after a questionable, underwhelming decision win over Nico Price. I think that is a very key angle to be looking at there, because so often when you have these prospects, they get busted by cardio. When you're being fed easy wins or just like layups to really like blow up your stock and make you look like this like Terminator, not finishing in round 1 and then having to go the distance, it actually usually does hamper them, because they become so reliant and they believe in their hype and their power, and they just don't have the cardio. I misspoke there. He actually did go to round 2 against Nico Price. Still finished him though, which is quite impressive. So yeah, I do think it's a bit of a wake-up call. I think back to guys like Raul Rosas Jr., Joe Pyfer, when they've been forced to go the distance after being so dominant early on, they come back better after that fight, because they realize that it's not as easy as they thought it was. So perhaps that was the wake-up call that Jacobe Smith needed. So, yeah, intrigued to see this one go down, but I obviously don't know anything about Josiah Harrell, so I'm intrigued to see if Jacobe Smith really is as good as people say he is against an unknown quantity. How about you, Dom? Do you have anything to add, or is this a mystery to you as well?
No, this will be an interesting fight to watch for me. I won't bet on it, and I haven't watched any of Josiah Harrell, so I can't comment on him. But yeah, as you said, the money came in on him. Initially, he opened at plus 400, and now just recently, he seems to be creeping back up. But it's within a range, like you said. He's about plus 250. So yeah, I think that makes it even more interesting. That obviously people are watching tape on Harrell and they like him. But yeah, I think Jacobe Smith, rightful favourite. So let's move on to our bets.
Yeah, small font. Sorry about that. There's a lot of bets here on this one. I have gone a bit crazy with props, which is something I try not to do these days. But the money lines just didn't appeal to me. The only ones that did right off the bat, I had Anthony Hernandez and Alden Correa, both of their money lines in a parlay at plus 102. Spoken about Hernandez enough. Correa, I think, is just better than Luis Gurule. I think Gurule is not long for the UFC. He's kind of shown himself to be a bit of a busted prospect, whereas I think Correa has the goods, could well be one to watch in the coming years. That could turn out to be a terrible statement, but I'm impressed by what I've seen so far. I taped him regionally as well for his UFC debut, where I bet him as a big dog as well, which I'm trying to tell myself that's not the reason that I've gone back to the well here, but I think that maybe I have like some sort of like allegiance with the guy. but either way, I think that, you know, there were a lot of short price favorites on this card to be choosing to parlay alongside Hernandez, and for me, Correa stood out as the best one. Dan Ige finish only. I mentioned that as well. I think that Ige should be expected to finish this one more than Melquizael Costa should. So minus 115 felt like generous odds to me, because at the end of the day, the most likely outcome is that Costa wins a decision. If so, I get my money back, and I like that kind of insurance. Also, a small sprinkle on Ige by KO, which is kind of the same thing. The Zach Reese versus Pereira fight, I went back and forth on this one, and if you listen to the early leans breakdown, both myself and Dom were very close to betting Pereira's money line. I'm not sure if either of us actually ended up doing it. I definitely didn't, but money did come in on him, so I guess we were still vindicated in that aspect. Instead, I went with the under 1.5 rounds for that, because I think that Pereira probably finishes early against Zach Reese if he is the Pereira that we're expecting to see, which is a more rejuvenated and a more enthusiastic one. So obviously, small sprinkle as well on Pereira money line and under 1.5 rounds, as that's the same kind of narrative there. Next up, Jocelyn Edwards inside the distance. Bit of a sort of conspiracy play, this one. I mean, I was brutally betrayed by the judges in their first fight. I think that Edwards won that fight clearly, but got robbed. She's improved her dangerousness. I think she learnt a lesson from that one, that simply existing and having positional control is not enough to win you a fight. She identified that grappling was the way. And she will probably look for takedowns again here. I've made a mistake on the slide here. I noticed that's supposed to say Jocelyn Edwards by submission for 0.1 unit at plus 800. Because I think that Jocelyn Edwards will look for takedowns. She's improved her grappling. She's been doing BJJ competitions. I think she's probably a bit more dangerous on the mat this time around. And I hope that she hunts for a submission and tries to find one. And then, of course, I absolutely had to go for the Ramiz Brahimajeva Ninja Choke option at plus 10,000. Is that? I don't know. 100 to 1 essentially is in the UK. That would be called. I think the Brahimaj is obviously a very front choke heavy fighter. We all know that he has an amazing guillotine. It is very impressive. And Puna Soriano sticks his head into guillotines, as we identified in the early leans breakdown. I think that the front chokes are very live for Ramiz. But he's shown that if his initial guillotine doesn't work, he'll switch it up to a ninja choke. It's what he almost caught one of his opponents with. I forget the name of the person. It wasn't Vanderford. It was the other one. He's Billy Goff. That's the one. Yeah. So it's there. It's there in his wheelhouse. And, you know, odds like that, I think is absolutely worth a punt. So there's a small play there. Finally, Carly Giudice to win by KO. This feels very chalky, but I do think that Giudice is going to destroy her opponent if they stay at distance for too long, because she's shown herself to be very consistently dangerous on the feet, which is refreshing to see for women's MMA. I think she gets a finish here. The KO everywhere else is like -160, -170. So I don't know how I was able to find it at -120, but I thought that was good value, so I took that. So yeah, weird slate, lots of small bets, lots of props. So it could turn out to be a terrible night, but we'll see. Yeah, I'm kind of just excited for so many of these fights that I'm really intrigued for this one. So looking forward to hopefully making some profit. How about you, Dom? What have you got for this one?
Yeah, this is the first card I think I can remember anyway where I actually paid attention to it, or I don't have a single underdog pick. So that makes me very sad and makes me think that I'm making mistakes. Yeah, I've got Anthony Hernandez money line. So I've got these like chalky favorites. Like I've got Hernandez. Well, we said that we don't think that's chalky, but I got him quite early at -220. I don't usually like to play favorites, but I feel pretty convicted on him. And I've got him to finish either win the fight by decision or finish late. I actually put a unit on this, so I updated the slide, but it hasn't updated. But that's fine. So I've got 1 unit on that. The late win prop for Hernandez. That's priced closer to even money, and I think that's great value personally. Then I have Melquizael Costa, as I mentioned, money line. Got him at -180. Just think he's better everywhere at this stage of his career against Ige. I wouldn't rule out an Ige KO. That could definitely be live. I think he's definitely live to hurt Costa at some point. I think Costa's recoverability has improved. Some of the losses that you mentioned, Will, they happened early in his career. He was 25 years old, I think, when he fought Steve Garcia, who was the elder statesman in that matchup. I think he's progressed a lot. And I didn't put 0.25 units on Costa winning round 3 hours. I put 0.1. So I definitely wouldn't go crazy on a 20-1 option here. Like I said, it's speculative that Costa does enough damage to sink in a rear naked choke at the very end of the fight. Sorry, Will. It's just a punty play. And then you mentioned Michel Pereira. Yeah, I did end up taking his money line. Don't feel great about it. Didn't put quite a unit on it. So this one, I just think that Reese hasn't shown enough at this stage to be, a close money odds with Pereira. So I'm happy to take this price. I would have preferred something like close to even money, but I think he should be a favorite. I think he's the more explosive athletic fighter. I think he's more well-rounded. He's shown us more in the UFC. I think Reese can win this. I think the way that Reese wins is obviously he's got the early finishing upside. That's generally how he's looking to finish, but yeah, I think if it goes long, I think Pereira should be favored for the decision, but I think it'd be a bit, I don't want to see it go to decision. I want to see Pereira finish early, basically. I think that's right. But I think Pereira has the decision equity in my mind. And lastly, heavyweight slop. I leaned in on Onte D'Elia. Did quite a lot of tape for this, and it's one of those ones. I was pretty convicted on Kuniev. Like that's the most conviction I've had in a bet for a long time. I was really convicted in it. I can't get there with D'Elia. I can't feel like he should be. Like I should play a lot of money on this, but I'm almost there. Like the thing with D'Elia is he's not been in the UFC, right? So a lot of the footage is from PFL that I'm relying on, but he's had grappling fights with a guy called Goltsov, who's a PFL guy who's like 11, 12-4, I think. And Goltsov gets everyone down, and he did get D'Elia down, right? So I think that Spivak can get D'Elia down, but Onte D'Elia has a judo background. He worked back to his feet. Actually, he reversed position on Goltsov, and Goltsov is an absolutely massive heavyweight. Like, this guy's enormous. He looked like a weight class above D'Elia. D'Elia reversed him twice in round 1, and he reversed him in round 2 to end up in top position. Now, I know Spivak has very good control, so I'm hoping this doesn't go to the mat. I'm hoping that the takedown defense of D'Elia just holds up, because I think if this is standing, I think it should be D'Elia winning this fight, most likely by knockout. Yeah, so I took the money line here. Again, it's like it was something at first I thought would be great value. But on reflection, just the little things, the little things being things like Spivak is the younger fighter, right? D'Elia is extremely battle worn. With the Kuniev, it was kind of reversed actually. Like Kuniev was like the younger fighter, and Jalton was the older fighter. So there were just things there that I just really liked about Kuniev. But here, there are a lot of things to like about D'Elia, but there's something that tells me like, it's not going to be clear cut, and it's always down to Spivak and can he get the takedown. And I actually predict that he will get at least one takedown here, and I think it's about D'Elia surviving. And he's tough, right? D'Elia's tough. He's been around the block. Obviously, he's aggrieved at his last loss to Waldo Costa fight, which he probably, I don't know. I think he probably could have won that fight. I think Waldo is vastly overrated, to be honest. I think Waldo was lucky to get that win. And I think Ante D'Elia hopefully shows out here and shows that he should be in the top 10 of the heavyweight division. And with that, I'll pass over to Josh.
Yeah, I mean, pretty standard stuff for me. You got a parlay there and then some alt bets. So let's go through it. Parlay. The first leg is Del Valle or Vale or whatever money line. I don't think he is going to be in any danger when he fights Levitt. Levitt seems to be a one-trick pony when it comes to grappling, and I think Yadier can beat Levitt to the punch when it comes to getting into submission positions or positions in which he can maintain control. Correa KO points, double chance. He has better boxing than Gurule, and I think we're going to see that boxing damage accumulate over time. And if he can't get the KO, then from the damage factor alone, he should be able to get the scorecard win or the decision. Costa Ige goes the distance. I really think we're going to be in for a fun and competitive scrap. Both fighters are durable enough to not really get finished. Even though we are speculating that maybe Costa can be the one to finally, tickle the chin of Ige and finish him. So I don't think it happens. I hope it doesn't happen because I want a parlay to hit for once. But if it doesn't happen, I'm happy. So there's that. And then Strickland Hernandez goes the distance. Round 4 starts over 3.5 rounds. You get the gist. It's gonna go long, and yeah, pretty much. It's as advertised, really. Both fighters can be durable. Both aren't really easy to finish, and just the style clash alone is going to show us that, or tell us really, it's going to be a bit of a slop or a bit of a slow fight to watch, and that's what I'm hoping for. As for the alt bets, I got Rowe via KO point. That's a double chance. JPL Jean Paul something or other. He's pretty hittable. And given that he has like a 6 or 8 inch reach disadvantage, he is going to get tagged up by Rowe if he doesn't get the takedowns. And so I do think that Rowe via KO or by points is an angle that might hit, or whatever they call it. I don't know. I'm not a big gambler. I don't know what the hell an angle is. But anyway, Njokwani via KO round 1. The weight cut for Chidi is probably going to be bad for him in the long run in this fight. And typically when we see a weight cut in which a fighter makes weight but they look like shit, their cardio during that fight is gone, right? They fight like they smoke a pack of cigarettes a day, or they have that spicy cough back in the day, all that shit, right? So I reckon the first round KO is going to be there for Njokwani, and also because Carlos Leal is coming off of a first round KO loss against Salikov. So yeah, I think it was the first round. It could be second. One of those 2 rounds. Either way, Leal's chin is probably in a questionable state right now. And yeah, Ige via points. That is something I kind of really leaned into during the week. Like, I mean, it's his only route to victory, I reckon. I don't think he's going to finish Costa. I don't think there's going to be any submission there or anything. It's going to be a competitive fight. And in a competitive fight, it could go either way, right? So Ige via points is a alt bet there. Medic via KO round 1. Jeff Neal used to be a badass back in the day. He used to be the essence of like his nickname, Hands of Steel, right? He used to be someone who had great boxing, great discipline, great defense. But nowadays, he's a bit of a rocky fighter to watch. And I feel like Medic in his first round glory could knock out Neil, maybe. Who knows? And then Strickland via points. That one's just a given, really. Yeah. The 5-round fight against Hernandez, he could win. I mean, I can see it. So that's my very, very simplistic bets that I've made, and hopefully at least the alt bets hit. Because if not, then I'm gonna be on the street somewhere begging for cash. So yeah.
Well, that's all of our bets, and that brings us to the end of the episode. So thank you for tuning in. Thanks for any likes and subscriptions, and yeah, we'll see you on the next one.